Continuing now our demonstration of creating menus in the Visual Basic environment, one of the things you might want to do to your menus is to create access keys. Access keys are very similar to the way access keys are created with buttons. That is, if I want to create an access key with my File menu, I simply click on File, activating it, go to the text property where the word File appears, and insert an ampersand before the letter F in File. And as you can see on the menu item now is the letter F underscored. Likewise, if I want to go to File and Open, I click on Open in the text property, insert an ampersand, and I've created an access key for File Open. So just like buttons, you can create access keys by using the ampersand. One key difference between menu items and buttons, however, is that once the project is running and you select, for example, the File menu, the items underneath File become hotkeys through their access keys. That is, if I select File, all I need to do is press the letter O to activate the Open menu item, as opposed to having to press Alt-O. But other than that, menus and buttons treat their access keys in a very similar fashion. Another way to build in some keyboard functionality to your menu items is to create keyboard shortcuts. Many computer users would prefer to use keyboard shortcuts rather than using a mouse to select an item on the screen. For example, many applications from Microsoft will use Control-P for printing and Control-S for saving and so forth. You can create your own keyboard shortcuts for your menu items and choose whether or not to display the shortcuts on the menu. For example, if I choose Open and I go to the Properties window, and as you can see, the shortcut key is currently none. Clicking on the drop-down box, I can now choose a combination of Control, Shift, and Alt, along with the various letters and other function keys and other special symbols. If I follow Microsoft standards, I will create a shortcut key of Control and then the letter O. Now I've created a shortcut key for Control-O, which means now the user doesn't have to activate the menu at all. All they have to do is to know that Control-O is the shortcut key and press those two letters simultaneously. Note also that you can control whether the shortcut keys are visible or not. By default, they are visible since the Show Shortcut Key property is set to true. If I change this to false, now the shortcut key is no longer visible to the user. Although it is still functional, it is not visible to the user. My suggestion is to keep it as the default of true so the user will know when they first come to this menu item that they do indeed have a shortcut key of Control-O, in this case for Open. When creating shortcut keys, you can use many combinations of function keys, the Alt key, the Shift key, and the Control key. Keep in mind the standards for Windows menus, and don't create combination of keys that will create confusion or cause some other issues for your user, because they may be used to using a standard Windows shortcut key that you've now created to be customized to do something completely different. Of course, ultimately the decision is yours whether to do that or not, but that is my suggestion. If you plan your menus so they look like other Windows programs, typically your client and your Windows users will thank you. Another property that can affect the way the menu will function for the user is to use the checked property. A menu item may contain a check mark beside it indicating that the item has been checked. Usually a check mark next to a menu item indicates that the option is currently selected. By default, the check property is set to false. You can change it at design time or in code. For example, if I choose Tools and Options, you can see there's a check mark. That's because I have changed the checked property for that item to true. If I change it back to false, which was its original, there's no check mark there. But changing it back to true now creates this check mark. If you create a menu item that can be turned on and off, you should include the check mark to indicate its current state. To change a menu item state in code, you set its check property to true or false, depending on what the functionality may call for. The check mark is a toggle switch. The first time the user goes to it and selects the item, the check mark will appear. When they return to that menu item for a second time, the check mark will then disappear, meaning that the state has been reversed. One last item. Using my About and Help menu item, I can choose the enabled property to be set to either true or false. By default it is true. If I change it to false, at runtime now this menu item will appear grayed. That is different than the others, and it does not have any function. The user cannot click on it to perform any functionality at this point. It will remain in this state until you write code that will change the enabled property back to true. But you can set the initial settings by changing the enabled property to either true or false for any of these items.